Hey, what's up? It's Foster, and today's gonna be a pretty cool video because as you can tell, we've got a new car on the lift, and that's because I'm gonna be installing the IAG EJ Series oil pan. So we're actually going to be installing the full Street Series oil pan package, which is a complete kit, but you can also option it just as the oil pan itself. Before I get started with the installation, why don't we go over some of the features of the IAG oil pan and why people love it as a solution to fix the oiling issues on their Subaru. So first of all, you're going to get the windage tray. It's going to capture the oil vapors around your crankshaft, help reduce drag, which will free up some horsepower, and it'll help keep your oil where you want it in the pan. Next up, we've got the oil pickup itself, and the IAG oil pickup is nice for a couple different reasons. The main one is that the stock oil pickup on these cars is known for cracking and failing, which can lead to catastrophic engine failure. So this is obviously going to be a lot stronger and you're not going to have to worry about that. Another benefit is it is slightly wider in diameter, so you're going to get better oil flow as well. Then inside the pan itself, you've got the baffles, and this one, since I said is a Street Series pan, it's got the Street Series baffles, which is gonna prevent oil from sloshing around and moving away from your oil pickup. But if you do a lot of track days, I would recommend going with our Competition Series oil pan, which includes this Competition Series oil baffle. And it has a bunch of trap doors in it, which allow oil to go one direction but not the other, essentially trapping oil right by your oil pickup, which will prevent oil starvation during high G corners. A couple of other really cool features of this oil pan is it actually features a 30% larger capacity compared to your stock oil pan, and it has a port here on the bottom, so if you want to run an oil temperature sensor, you can. Then if we flip it around, you're going to see it's got cooling fins as well as an oil drain plug on the bottom. And this is conveniently located because you're going to get the most old oil out of your pan between changes, and it features a standard size drain plug so you can still run a normal crush washer. And then this one in particular does have a thermal coating on it, which allows it to disperse heat even faster than an uncoated oil pan. So now that you know a little bit about it, why don't we go ahead and get started with the installation.
The first step, of course, is to disconnect your battery, and next we're going to work on getting the factory top mount intercooler out of the way. I'm going to start by removing the two 12mm bolts that attach the bypass valve. Then I'm going to disconnect the intercooler from the turbo, and next I'm going to loosen the clamp on the throttle body and disconnect the bracket. At this point, the intercooler should be free and we can wiggle it out of the way. Use a 14mm socket and wrench and disconnect your factory pitch stop mount. Later on, we'll have the ability to raise the engine up a little higher with this disconnected, which will make your life a whole lot easier. The next step is to drain your oil, and I'm going to let it drain for a while because I don't want any old oil in that pan making a mess once I remove it. Next, I'm going to remove the factory engine mounts so that we can jack the engine up like I mentioned earlier, and these require a breaker bar and an impact gun. Use a jack and a microfiber from the headers, and you can jack your engine up high enough to access those bolts on the backside of your oil pan. The best way to get those hard to reach bolts in the back of the oil pan is with a ratchet, a long extension, a flex joint, and 10mm socket. That's going to make your life a whole lot easier. Kind of hard to see from this angle, but I'm using some lubricant on the dipstick tube. That way when we go to remove the oil pan, it should be pretty easy. Alright, it's finally time to remove the stock oil pan. I'm going to use this long breaker bar. You might end up bending your pan, so just keep that in mind in case you ever plan on reusing it. And it will take a little bit of elbow grease, so just give it a good hard pull to get it off that oil dipstick. There's still a couple more components to go. I'm going to remove the stock oil pickup using a 10mm ratchet and socket, and then once that's done, we can also remove the stock windage tray. As you can see, there was a lot of gunk left over on our block from the old oil pan, so we're going to take a moment to clean that up. But one tool that really helps with this process is a carbide scraper. Then once we got all the silicone off of the mating surface, I used a cloth and some brake clean to make sure that everything was nice and clean. The IAG oil pickup is compatible with your stock oil pan and with aftermarket oil pans like we're going to be using, but since we're using the aftermarket oil pan, we are going to actually run the spacer as well. So pay close attention in the video to where I put my O-rings. There's going to be one between your oil pickup and the spacer, and then you're going to install your hardware with the little O-rings to hold your hardware in place, and then finally you've got one more rubber O-ring on the bottom of your metal spacer. When you're all done, it should look like this. Next, we're going to do the hardware on either side of the oil pickup. Again, we're running that little metal spacer, and make sure that you have a washer above your hardware and that little rubber O-ring below that's going to help hold everything in place. Next up, we're going to install the preformed rubber O-ring for our oil pan. Make sure you don't accidentally stretch out the O-ring during installation, and ensure that you have a nice flush fitment. Next, we can install the IAG windage tray using the hardware provided. We're going to use the short Allen bolts in the back, but we're not going to put anything in the front because that's going to come on the next step. Once you're done with that step, you can install the IAG pickup, and as you can see, the feet of the oil pickup align perfectly with the windage tray, which is why we didn't want to install any hardware in the front slots earlier. Loosely tighten down your new hardware, and once that's done, torque everything down to 10 Newton meters. We've got everything on and torqued to spec. Now I'm going to sit back and enjoy the view of my new oil pickup and windage tray, which we're probably never going to see again once we put the pan on. Alright, don't quit yet on this project, we're getting really close. We're going to start by removing the dipstick O-rings and installing our new ones, and make sure you lubricate them for easy installation. Then use some Fujibond on the seams of the block just to make sure that we don't have any leaks. Next, you can install your oil pan paying close attention to your dipstick tube. Once it's up in place, you can loosely install some hardware. Once all your hardware is loosely installed, then you can torque it all down to 5 foot-pounds. So if you're not choosing to install an oil temperature sensor, then you can install the plug provided and torque that down to 5 foot-pounds as well. Next, install your new drain plug with a crush washer and torque that down to 33 foot-pounds. Okay, the pan install is pretty much complete, but while we're underneath the car, I'm going to remove our old oil filter. Once that's done, I'm going to install a new one, and then we can put the car on the ground and fill it back up with fresh oil. Keep in mind that your new IAG oil pan has up to 30% more capacity than your OEM oil pan, so start with 5 quarts of oil and then top it off if needed. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to install the pitch mount, I'm going to reinstall the battery, and I'm going to install the top mount intercooler, and we're pretty much done with this project.
All right, well there you have it. The EJ Series oil pan is a huge upgrade for these cars, and it fixes a lot of the oiling issues that you hear about with these EJs. With that said, if you guys like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. And if you are interested in picking up an oil pan package for yourself, I'll make sure I put links in the description down below. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.